In the middle of World War II, the Germans, led by Hitler, were taking over a lot of Europe. They were capturing soldiers from one country and holding them as prisoners of war in another. However, because the camps were not secure, many of these prisoners managed to escape. Hitler was enraged and ordered his men to construct a more sophisticated prison to prevent prisoners from escaping. That was how Stalag Luft III was built. It was a fortified prison that no one could escape from. But this didn't stop one man from trying to escape. He saw an opportunity to escape and decided not to go alone. He had other plans to set over 200 soldiers free. But how could this be possible in this Iron City? This is the insane story of how 76 soldiers escaped from one of the toughest prisons in the world. In 1943, World War II was at its peak. This war was the biggest fight in history, and it lasted for 6 years. Germany, led by Hitler, had taken control of the majority of Europe. They captured many soldiers, making them prisoners of war. These soldiers were kept in huge concentration camps made of military barracks, without cells and iron bars. Because of the unsecured nature of these camps, most of the prisoners attempted to escape. While many of them managed to get away, most of them were apprehended again. Hitler was enraged by all of these escapes and wanted to put a stop to them. As a result, he directed his men to construct new and stronger camps to house prisoners who had attempted to flee. Among these camps, Stalag Luft III was one of the most well-known. The whole point of this camp is to prevent breakouts. It had strict security measures that made any attempt to flee a death trap. It was made up of military barracks built on strong stilts raised by solid cement pillars from the ground, making digging underground tunnels impossible. Because the soil in the prison was as soft as sand, any digging would immediately collapse. To make matters worse, microphones were carefully planted beneath the soil to detect any digging sounds. The prison was surrounded by 2 barbed wire fences, with guards stationed in watchtowers to keep an eye on the camp. With everything in place, it appeared impossible to escape this prison. But there was one man, a prisoner, who not only wanted to escape at all costs, but also had a plan to bring many other prisoners with him. This man was Roger Bushell, a British Air Force pilot. During the war, he flew on a mission to France against Germany, but his plane was shot down. He used his parachute to escape before it crashed, but then immediately after he landed, he was caught by the German forces. Every time they put him in a camp, he found a way to escape. The more he escaped, the more he was recaptured. One time, he broke out of a train with a friend, and this escape would cause him the pain of his life. The man he escaped with was a soldier from Czech, so they had a plan to go to Czech to find a hideout. At that time, Czech was occupied by the Germans. When they got there, a local family had mercy and provided them with shelter and food. The family kept hiding them from the German soldiers for a while, until the situation became dangerous to handle. Unfortunately, a chief German commander was assassinated in Czech. So the German soldiers started searching everywhere, arresting and executing anyone they suspected. When the soldiers came close to the family that was hiding Roger and his friend, they decided to leave, not wanting to put the family in danger. But their escape failed, and they were caught almost immediately. Even though Roger and his friend didn't tell anyone about the family, it seems the neighbors snitched on them for fear of being punished. Because of this betrayal, the German soldiers killed everyone in that family. This hit Roger to the core. He felt angry and vengeful toward the Nazis more than ever. He wanted to bring down the German regime by any means, but unfortunately, the Germans locked him up in Stalag Luft III. This prison was set up on Polish lands, which were still under German control. Even though it was heavily guarded, Roger didn't let that stop him from trying to escape. As soon as he got there, he started thinking of ways to break out. He started by building relationships with other prisoners, forming a small group of about 5 or 6 members. Let's call this team the Escape Council. Their mission was to help as many prisoners escape as possible. Roger's ultimate idea was to cause chaos among the Germans. He knew that if they could get hundreds of experienced soldiers out into enemy territory, it would distract the Germans. Instead of focusing on the front lines, They would have to deal with the trouble happening right under their noses. But to pull this off, they needed a solid plan. Their only option was to dig a tunnel to escape, but that was an impossible mission with all the security we talked about. Guards were always on the lookout for any possible tunnels prisoners might dig. Roger came up with a brilliant idea after carefully considering every possibility of being discovered. Instead of just one tunnel, they would dig 3 tunnels in various locations throughout the prison. This way, if the guards discovered one tunnel, they would still have others to deal with. But the problem with this idea was that the camp was filled with special forces soldiers sent by Hitler himself. These soldiers specialized in dealing with prison camps and escape attempts. Any little move, and they will be caught. At this point, Roger realized that keeping the project a secret was critical, so they devised a clever strategy to conceal their plan. They gave the tunnels ordinary names. They named the first tunnel Tom, the second Dick, and the third Harry. Whenever they spoke about the tunnels, they used these names to code their conversations. So they would say things like, "We will be meeting Harry tonight," or "Tom is doing well," or "Who's going with me to see Dick now?" This way, even if someone overheard them, they wouldn't know that they were talking about tunnels. They also knew that one common strategy of the guards was to plant spies among the prisoners. These spies would pretend to be one of them, but would actually be working for the guards. These spies were often new prisoners or transferred from other prisons. The old prisoners had a clever trick to spot the spies planted among them. When a new prisoner arrived, they would strike up a friendly conversation and ask about where they came from and how they got caught. Let's say the new prisoner claimed he was from Canada. They would bring over an old prisoner whom they trusted was from Canada. This old prisoner would ask detailed questions about the city, the weather, its people, places, and specific neighborhoods around Canada where the new prisoner lived. These were questions only someone from Canada could answer. It was like a friendly chat, but it helped them figure out if the new person was a real soldier or a spy planted by the guards. If they found out someone was a spy, they would move to the guards and say to them, "We know this person isn't a real soldier. They're one of your informants. It's either you take them out or we can't guarantee their safety." Surprisingly, this strategy always worked. It helped them fish out any informants trying to hide among them. This was crucial for Roger's plan because he wanted to smuggle out hundreds of prisoners, and he needed to make sure there were no spies among them. Otherwise, everything would be ruined. He planned to get at least 200 prisoners out. Managing such a massive escape operation was definitely a difficult mission. Roger and his friends in the Escape Council were the only ones who knew all the details of the plan. The other prisoners who were involved only knew what they needed for their part. Each group had a specific task, but didn't know the whole plan. For instance, one group knew about Tunnel Harry, another group knew about Tunnel Dick, others knew about providing materials, and so on. This way, every prisoner had a unique mission: to keep movements and plans secret. The Escape Council understood the need for a spy network to monitor the guards' movements, so they stationed prisoners strategically around the prison to monitor the guards. If a guard was getting close to a working site, the prisoner on watch might adjust his cap. The next prisoner would see it and stretch his arms, and the one after might scratch his head. Each movement was a coded message sent to the other workers in the area to signal them of any incoming danger. This way, they could stop their work, whether it was digging, hiding dirt, or making equipment, before the guards would show up. The genius part is that none of these prisoners knew each other. Neither did they know the meaning of the signals they were sending. This smart plan kept the operation a secret. Even those involved didn't know the whole picture, ensuring the guards were kept in the dark about what was really happening. With all these coded languages in place, the prisoners now faced a big challenge. The ground soil was sandy and soft, making the tunnels vulnerable to collapsing. How would they dig these tunnels to ensure they don't collapse on them? Their solution was smart, but tricky. They decided to get wooden boards from the prison beds to support the tunnel walls. But where could they get hammers and iron nails? Even if they had them, the noise from hammering would trigger the microphones hidden in the ground. So they had to engineer a clever system. They cut the boards into cube-like pieces that interlocked with each other. When placed together, they would hold themselves up and reinforce the tunnel walls, preventing collapse. But they needed to be very careful because any little mistake could make the pieces fall apart, causing the whole tunnel to collapse on them. Now, how did they cut these boards from the prison beds and shape them into cubes? They used something no one would expect to be a weapon. They made good use of gramophones. These were old music players that were allowed in their cells. These recorders had a strong, sharp metal spring inside. They took out the springs, straightened them out, and somehow they worked like a saw. That's how they shaped the wooden boards for their tunnels. With all of the necessary tools on hand, all that remained was for Roger and his friends to continue digging the tunnels. They had to dig very deep because the microphones would pick up the digging sounds if they were too close to the surface. The task of digging tunnels 10 meters deep was difficult but necessary to avoid detection by the microphones. After reaching this depth, they had to dig outward, crossing the prison walls and aiming to extend the tunnels into the forest among the trees. These tunnels might reach lengths of 100 meters or more. Can you imagine how challenging it must have been to dig this far using those tools in those conditions? To make matters worse, they had to dig 3 tunnels, all with the same standards. Thankfully, having many prisoners involved helped speed things up. But then there was another problem: the heap of sand from the digging. They had to get rid of it without raising any suspicion. They would sneak it out in bags hidden in their pants and toss it into the prison's vegetable yards. The most critical part of this escape plan was keeping the tunnel entrances a secret. Only the escape council and those responsible for digging knew about them. These entrances had to stay hidden because if they were discovered, the whole plan would fail. So where were these entrances? Remember, the prison huts were raised on cement pillars, exposing the ground. How could they dig without revealing the entrances? Well, the entrances were in the cement pillars themselves. These pillars were used to extend underground waterways and power lines. Some were bigger, depending on the size needed for these extensions. The first entrance was for Tunnel Harry. It was cleverly hidden beneath a heating stove in one of the huts. Each hut had a heating stove, which sat on top of ceramic plates. These plates were placed to protect the wooden floors from the heated metals of the stoves. Coincidentally, one of these stoves was directly above a cement pillar. So the prisoners lifted the stove, along with the ceramic plate, and started digging beneath the cement pillar. The stove itself served as the cover for the entrance, making it not suspicious to the guards who had originally positioned it there. As for the second tunnel, Tunnel Dick, its entrance was in a shower drain. They dug directly through the drain. But how did they conceal it? A clever member of the Escape Council, a professional engineer, crafted a cement cover from dirt that mimicked the floor of the drain perfectly. He created a tile that fit precisely over the hole, which they had drilled in square. It was a smart and discreet entrance. Now, the third entrance for Tunnel Tom was also under a heating stove in another hut, but this one sat on a cement plate instead of a ceramic one. When the prisoners attempted to lift the stove, the plate started to crack. At this point, they could decide to drop that stove, find another stove, lift it, and start digging. But they couldn't. It wasn't that simple. They needed cement pillars to hide the entrance of the tunnels, but most of the stoves weren't positioned over cement pillars. To solve this, the engineer created a new cement plate to replace the cracked one and supported it with a wooden frame. Even if the guards noticed it, they wouldn't suspect anything. The prisoners had been successfully operating within the 3 tunnels for months, each tunnel concealed cleverly. But one day during a routine inspection, the guards entered to search the hut where Tunnel Tom's entrance was. That was the entrance that had a broken cement plate and was replaced by the engineer. That was the same entrance the guards were heading towards. Unfortunately, one of the guards was holding a heavy stick, and he mistakenly dropped it on the cement plate. The noise from the fall was suspicious. It sounded like there was something hollow beneath it. So the guard wanted to see what was there. He alerted the other guards, and they carefully moved the stove from its place and stumbled upon the entrance of Tunnel Tom. The cracked cement plate betrayed their hard work. After discovering the tunnel, the guards planted explosives in it, evacuated the hut, and destroyed it. But here's where Roger's initial strategy paid off. When the Germans saw how much effort and time had gone into building Tunnel Tom, they did not believe there could be 2 more similarly crafted tunnels elsewhere in the prison. Instead of tightening surveillance, they assumed that the tunnel explosion destroyed all their efforts, resources, and tools. The inmates were happy, and their worries were relieved by the guards' unexpected carelessness. However, a new obstacle appeared. The Germans began to expand the prison camp at the exact location where Tunnel Dick was being excavated. This expansion ruined their exit plan, which aimed to reach the nearby forest. The Germans started cutting down trees, which destroyed their escape route. Now they knew that Tunnel Dick was no longer an option. As a result, the Escape Council made a strategic decision. They stopped working on Tunnel Dick and focused solely on the last tunnel, Tunnel Harry. They turned Tunnel Dick into waste space to dispose of the soil excavated from Tunnel Harry. Now, all the work and effort were on Tunnel Harry, so it sped up the process even more. The prisoners worked on 3 important things to keep the tunnel functioning. The first thing they did was establish a ventilation system using milk cans that were attached together into a pipe and extended along the tunnel. To ensure proper airflow within the tunnel, they used bags they had. They transformed them into a primitive air pumping machine and placed them at the beginning of the tunnel. They had prisoners in charge of pumping air into the pipes. This innovation was vital to sustain the diggers and maintain air quality inside the tunnel. The second thing they did was to build a transportation system. They made a railway and placed a wooden cart on it. As the tunnel extended, this system allowed for efficient movement of diggers and soil. With the tunnel's length surpassing 100 meters, the narrow size of the tunnel made moving in and out difficult. So this railway became very important. The final thing they focused on was lighting. The prisoners built a lighting system by stealing electric cables from the prison's official workers. These workers were aware of the theft, but they refused to alert the guards to avoid punishment. The prisoners connected these cables to various stolen lamps within the prison, establishing an excellent and extensive lighting system throughout the tunnel. These prisoners were experts in different areas, and together they did an amazing job. With basic tools and limited resources, they achieved significant advancements because they worked together as a team. As the tunnel neared completion, the prisoners turned their attention to post-escape preparations. They selected skilled forgers within their team to create fake identities and documents for every prisoner preparing to escape. Crafting these papers was crucial to ensuring that those who would escape successfully could move around freely without raising suspicion. But one of the things that posed a challenge was acquiring photographs for the official documents. The prison administration had their pictures, and the guards were the only ones who could access them. In this case, the prisoners resorted to a clever tactic. They turned to blackmailing. But how would these prisoners blackmail these guards? This is where the skills of experts come to work. Professional pickpockets among them would steal identity cards or keys from unsuspecting guards. Then 2 other prisoners would approach the victim guard and say, "Hey, I heard you lost your card." The guard, surprised at this point, will ask, "What? How did you know? Do you know where it is?" The prisoners, having the upper hand, would say to the guard, "Relax, we know." But, if the commander finds out, you're off to the front lines, right? Because most of the guards in the yard fear the front lines. He will then beg the prisoners and say, "Please don't tell the commander. What do you want?" The prisoners will then say, "Nothing big, just a few things to help us out." The prisoners would then ask for things like photos or stamps to aid in forging documents. Scared of being exposed and sent to the front lines, the guards would ignore what those photographs would be used for. They would willingly hand over what was requested, thinking these materials wouldn't actually assist the prisoners in escaping. Through these methods, the prisoners managed to obtain everything necessary to complete the forgery of their documents and identities, ensuring they were better equipped for their escape plan. At long last, in March of 1944, after over a year of careful planning and relentless work, the tunnel was finally completed. Everything was set for the implementation of the escape plan. All they needed was to wait for the right opportunity to execute the mission. They were careful in selecting a day to escape. They were concerned about weather conditions. They wanted to avoid nights with a full moon, and although they hoped to escape on a rainy night, the rain never came. So their focus shifted to a night close to the start of the lunar cycle, when the brightness of the moonlight will be as little as possible. On March 24, 1944, The Escape Council decided that this was the night, and the escape plan was set in motion without any delays. All prisoners who were intending to escape were to leave their huts and converge at Hut 104, where the entrance of Harry's tunnel was located. The Escape Council had a list of every escaping prisoner and checked each person entering the hut, ensuring the gradual execution of the operation. Prisoners arrived in small groups to avoid drawing attention. One by one, the prisoners descended into the tunnel, crawling through its length toward the exit. However, when they got to the end of the tunnel, there was no exit. Roger's decision was to delay the opening of the exit until the actual night of the escape. He assumed it was risky to dig the exit before escaping. He feared that a passing guard might notice the exit, which would destroy their plan. So they agreed to keep the exit closed until the crucial moment of escape. As the prisoners at the front of the escape reached the tunnel's end, they realized something was wrong. They discovered their calculations were wrong. The exit didn't lead to the forest as they had thought. Instead, it placed them only about 50 meters away from the prison's fence, where the watchtowers were. Coming out of the tunnel at that spot was very risky because the armed guards might spot them and open fire. Despite this terrible situation, the Escape Council decided to proceed with the escape because there was no time or opportunity to turn back. The prisoners started coming out of the tunnel one after the other. The process was very slow, and there were many unexpected problems they encountered that night. There was a power outage, which sent the tunnel into darkness. Also, parts of the tunnel collapsed, and it took a long time to be repaired before anyone could move out. The extraction of prisoners from the tunnel was slow and exhausting. It started at 10 p.m., and by 5 at dawn, only 76 prisoners had managed to exit. They scattered into various parts of the forest. At that time, the sun was rising, and the officers were on guard. Instead of going back and returning the next night, 3 extra prisoners came out of the tunnel and were quickly spotted by the guards. The guards moved quickly to surround the tunnel's opening. These last 3 prisoners feared for their lives and surrendered. They were rearrested and sent back to the camp. When the remaining prisoners who were at the exit of the tunnel saw the arrest of those 3 prisoners, they quickly aborted the mission and attempted to retreat back into the tunnel to the prison before the guards would get there and not find them. In the end, only 76 out of the 200 prisoners who were planning to escape succeeded in running away. Though 76 is a large number, within 72 hours, the majority of those who escaped were recaptured. Many of them were arrested just a few kilometers away from the prison. Despite all their efforts, the escape had not yielded the desired freedom the prisoners hoped for. Some of the escaped prisoners managed to evade capture and return to their countries, actively engaging in the ongoing war. However, the rest of the prisoners were not so lucky, including Roger Bushell himself, the mastermind of this escape operation. Roger attempted to travel by train using a false identity, but tight security measures after the escape led to his discovery and arrest. Normally, prisoners of war are treated with respect according to international agreements. While punishment might be accepted, execution isn't typically expected. When these prisoners tried to escape, they would rather have been sent to a much stronger prison. But this time was different. These prisoners escaped from the strongest prisons, and there was no other place to send them to. So Hitler was very furious at the escape from the so-called Iron Prison. With nothing left to do, he initially decided to execute all the prisoners, including those who were not able to escape, strip all the guards and responsible commanders of their positions, and punish them. But his officials advised him to kill only the 50 who were recaptured after the escape. So he ordered and supervised their execution. He might have carried out some of the executions himself. Despite the unexpected outcome of the escape and the loss of some prisoners' lives, Roger's plan succeeded in achieving its ultimate goal. It disrupted the focus and strategy of the German forces, achieving the intended distraction. Even in his final moments, Roger found relief knowing that his plan had accomplished its goal. That's the end of our story. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.